Okay, thank you for joining this webinar today. My name is Melissa Flora. I am the Midwest Account Manager with Mycorrhizal Applications. And today the subject of this webinar is Mycorrhizae 101 and the various formulation options that we offer at Mycorrhizal Applications. So before we dive into subject material, I will just briefly introduce you to the company. Mycorrhizal Applications was first established in 1995 when we introduced the first Ectomycorrhizal inoculum. Each product was a liquid and was made to order. Fast forward 5 years to year 2000, and we introduced our first Endomycorrhizal inoculum. And then 4 years later, we began the 4 species in vivo consortium and the 4 species in vitro consortium. That was around the same time that the forestry business started to decline, which was where the Ectomycorrhizal inoculum was centralized. And then we started to add more products to the product line, hopefully some that you're familiar with. We have our Ultrafine Endo in that mixture. And then in 2015, we were acquired by Valent Biosciences. And then we continued on with international registrations, furthered US registrations, and then began introducing some non-aqueous products and continued registrations in places like Hawaii and Alaska and DC. We actually just recently celebrated 26 years as Mycorrhizal Applications and 6 years as part of VBC. So the nuts and bolts of the presentation starts off with just explaining what mycorrhizal fungi are. So it's believed that mycorrhizal fungi have existed since the first plants on Earth, on dry land, have existed, bringing those out of water essentially 450 million years ago. They are a naturally occurring organism. Mycorrhizae form a symbiosis with about 95% of all land plants. The plants control the symbiosis, so they are the drivers of that relationship. And they do this by emitting a root hormone, otherwise known as root exudates. And this hormone is actually what triggers spore germination and allows the fungal hyphae to then colonize the plant's roots. And then they exist within the plant's rhizosphere, so they go in and out of the root's depletion zone, and they create fungal filaments by doing this, otherwise known as mycelium or fungal hyphae. The hyphae are effective at nutrient and water absorption, much more so than the roots themselves. They are much finer than a root hair. There are various types of mycorrhizae and various species of mycorrhizae within each of those types. The 2 types that we will discuss are both Endomycorrhizae and Endomycorrhizae, endo and ecto. And those 2 are what are most commonly commercially available. So just a quick snapshot, 3 steps of how it works. We talked about the plant emitting the root exudates and allowing the propagules to germinate and colonize the roots. This then forms the hyphae that proliferates out into the soil and the surrounding substrate. And then this will allow water, macronutrients, and micronutrients to be transported into the plant. So more on a root hair versus the fungal hyphae. So here on the left, you can see a root hair typically being able to absorb through its tips versus the fungal hyphae, which can actually absorb throughout the entire length of themselves. The rate of nutrient inflow is much lower with the root hair than what it will be with fungal hyphae. And the fungal hyphae are actually able to uptake nutrients from the soluble and the insoluble pool, whereas the root hair will only be able to uptake nutrients from that soluble pool. So the endo and ectomycorrhizae, with our endomycorrhizae, we have an association with upwards of 85% of plants. That's going to be most commercially produced greenhouse and nursery plants, leafy greens, flowers, berries, vegetables, grasses. And then our ectomycorrhizae is about 10% of plants. So that's conifers, spruce trees, hardwoods, things like oaks, maples, beech. So that's really only about 10%. We do have a quick snapshot on our website that can show some more commonly available crops and whether or not they're endo or ecto, or if they fall into a small subset of species that are either a different mycorrhizal association or they just don't form an association with mycorrhizae at all. That information can be found on this document here. Otherwise, we have a much more extensive document that I can email you. So here we show the differences in the roots for a colonized versus uncolonized root structure with mycorrhizae. You can see the spores and the fungal hyphae there on the top left. And then you can see the root cells on the bottom left that are just uncolonized. And then on the right, we actually show the difference between a colonized root with ectomycorrhizae versus endomycorrhizae. So with ecto, it is actually intercellular, which you can see there. And then on the right with the endo, it actually colonizes intracellularly. And it forms these vesicles and arbuscules. And those actually act as a reservoir, and they retain nutrients and water for the plant to later call on them. The Ectomycorrhizae does the same thing, but it does it within those mycelium hyphal filaments that you can see there. So with the primary benefits of mycorrhizae, we have an expanded root absorptive area. We have increased nutrient efficiency, water absorption, and improved plant growth and yield. So those are going to be our primary benefits. There's multiple secondary benefits. We talked about the fungal hyphae being able to extend beyond the root's depletion zone. It can actually do that up to 24 inches. And then mycorrhizae really help to eliminate the various stressors that a plant can go through. It increases their tolerance to them at the very least, to things like nutrient deficiency and drought, heavy metal toxicity, transplant shock, too much salinity, off pH levels, and things like that. And then it stores those nutrients and water within that mycelium like a reserve tank, as we've discussed. So in container grown plants, this is obviously really important. We're working with a finite amount of space within the soil and with the available nutrients and water and other inputs that you're introducing. Endomycorrhizae not actually increase the root to the point of the plant becoming root bound. What it actually does is it just increases the root's ability to absorb through that fungal hyphal network, as we've shown in the previous example. And this, of course, creates much less plant loss, reduced transplant shock, and then more effective use of each of your inputs. So I'll show you some photos of the mycorrhizae in action. Here on the left, we have a begonia trial. And the image on the right is actually a Microapply treated begonia. And then on the right image, the plant on the right, sorry, is also treated. So you can see a pretty significant difference there, both in the root and the foliage. And then we also did a glass box trial. You can see with the image on the right, the roots are much more defined and the plant is much more established for what's been treated. And we see a great improvement in foliage color as well. There was actually a great example of this at the most recent Cultivate. We had done a trial on Dahlia, and you can see obviously there's huge differences in just the quantity of blooms and the mass of the foliage, but also you can see when you look more closely that the foliage color is much more pronounced and healthy in those treated Dahlia. We have an example on the left here of apple rootstock, treated on the right again. And then another image of roots, and then that one is also treated on the right here, on the right image. And then with lavender plugs, this is after 8 weeks, and you can see those plugs on the left image on the left-hand side are much more established than the ones on the right. And then you can see the vegetation on the left, on the right-hand side image as well, is being treated with Microapply and much more established. This is actually a drought trial. You can see that the two affected wilted plants don't have a Microapply treatment in them whatsoever, and the others do. And then they have variations of fertilizer levels. So then I'm going to jump really quickly into a conversation about Glomalin, which is a really important item to consider when we're talking about mycorrhizae from an environmental aspect. So Glomalin is actually a glycoprotein that has been discovered by the production of fungal hyphae, mycelium in the soil. So mycorrhizae essentially produce this glomalin. And in this image, you can see the soil before the glomalin was extracted and then what it looks like after extraction. So imagine a situation in like desertification. This is what happens when the mycorrhizae has been completely depleted from that soil. The glomalin is really useful both in agricultural and horticultural settings because it introduces carbon into the soil, but furthermore, it also retains the carbon. This also produces aggregates in the soil, and it creates a much more aerated soil, and it allows better drainage. So better, more proper infiltration, but also retaining the water for plant use. So both the mycelium itself as well as the glomalin are allowing the soil to retain water so that your plant becomes less drought stressed. Obviously, that's something that's pretty important right now in various areas of the country. Mycorrhizae and specificity. So there is a great deal of variability in the benefits that are provided by mycorrhizae. We've discussed some primary ones. But one fungal species might form an association with multiple different plant species. So there's a low specificity among them. And then one host plant can have multiple different associations with multiple different species, even at the same time. And this can change throughout the life cycle of the plant, which season it happens to be in the year, or what stress the plant might be under at that particular time. And those different species are responsible for different functional benefits at various times. So the species can change of mycorrhizae with the plant phenology or physiology, which we've just discussed. One species does not fit all. So it can be dependent on the ecological conditions, the soil type, for example, what nutrient content is readily available. And then those populations will fluctuate throughout the growing season. And these mycorrhizal species complement one another. They're essentially just a really well-oiled machine. They're all on the same team. So the diversity within the inoculant increases your success rate because your plant is not dependent on just one species, expected to work as effectively all year round to its fullest capacity. The next important thing to understand beyond diversity within your product is what type of, if any, propagules it claims. So some products are spore only. Our products contain propagules. Propagules are both colonized root fragments and fungal spores. The short answer to this is a fungal hyphal network or colonized root fragments can colonize your plant very quickly and very effectively, allowing you to see the benefits of the mycorrhizae in 8 weeks or less. With the spores, it's a very resilient structure and can withstand many different extremes like temperature and varying degrees of pH and various other stressors. So you're getting the best of both worlds because you have both that really quick effect, and then you also have the spores that are there and continue to germinate and grow throughout the life cycle of the plant. So now we'll dive into the various product formulations that we offer. We have granular products, we have ultrafine products, we have suspendable fine powders, and then we've just most recently introduced a non-aqueous liquid as well. We have a product positioning chart available. If you email me, I can send this to you. It helps to understand which product for which application method would best suit you, whether or not that's OMRI listed, and then how many species of each are within that inoculum and of what type. So first we will talk about Microapply Endothermic. So this one is a non-aqueous liquid. It comes on a non-aqueous liquid carrier, and it can be mixed with liquid fertilizers, other biocontrol products, insecticides, herbicides, additives, fungicides, and lastly water. And it can be applied via drench watering systems. So soil drench via overhead boom sprayers, handheld backpack, drip irrigation, a hydro mulch or hydro seed slurry application. This one is a 1 pint bottle. They come 8 per case. It is a highly concentrated product, so a little bit goes a very long way. And we have actually been in discussion of introducing a gallon size very soon. This product is not currently OMRI listed. So if you were looking for something that was, we do have products in the suspendable category that are, but this one can be mixed directly into your stock tank and has become an extremely versatile product. We also have the Microapply Endo Granular and the Microapply Endo Ectogranular. These are both commonly applied via soil incorporation. In a 40-pound bag, we can treat up to 42 cubic yards. These are also both OMRI listed. And then we have the Ultrafine Endo and the Ultrafine Ecto. These are applied via soil incorporation if your soil hopper can homogenize the entire product. Otherwise, it is an easy plug tray dip or drench solution. Listed products, and they come on a clay carrier. We'll look at some cost breakdown for soil incorporation with the 4 products that we just mentioned. So for example, you can see with the Ultrafine Endo, it would run about $6.36 per cubic yard. And then with a plug tray dip, with the Ultrafine Endo, we're looking at about 2 ounces per 5 gallons. And if we were to apply this to a 388 plug tray for a treatment cost of about 4 to 7 cents per tray. We also have a Soluble Max. This one is a bit more concentrated. It's still a combo product. It has both endo and ecto species. This one can be applied via drench application, similar to those ultrafine powders, a root, a plug tray dip, and then it can be incorporated into the soil or applied directly at time of planting. 1 pound of this product will treat 26 gallons of water. And we have our injector products. We have an injector endo. This one is unrealistic. And then we have our injector ecto. This one is not unrealistic. These are both on humic acid carriers. They are highly concentrated products. They both come with a 20-gram scoop. 20 grams treats 100 gallons of drench at a 1:100 ratio. The 1 bag will treat 500 gallons of drench. Here are some examples of Ultrafine Endo soil incorporation. They are incorporating the Ultrafine Endo at a rate of 0.43 pounds per cubic yard of soil, blending that into the soil hopper, and then filling the plug trays. Once this is done, the colonization would take about 4 weeks to occur, and then you would see results in less than 8 weeks. This is an example of the injector endo drench application. They're using a 20-gram scoop for 100 gallons of water, applying via boom sprayer on all of the plug trays. So we'll go over some commonly asked questions. I mentioned this briefly, but a grower can start to see a difference in their crop after applying Mycorrhizae, sometimes as early as 4 weeks, but the general rule of thumb has been 8 weeks. This is because it varies by species, so our one-size-fits-all approach to that question is 8 weeks. But for example, that image of Dahlia that I showed you was actually after 7 weeks and 3 days. The crop time starts immediately after inoculation and can include time as a plug or cutting. How many times do I need to treat with Mycorrhizae? Once for most applications. There is the potential for additional applications in situations of high stress turf, things like that. But for annuals, 1 time, perennials, 1 time. The Mycorrhizae grow within the plant. Think of it as a healthy infection. So it's colonizing all of this plant and growing with the plant as the plant grows and throughout the surrounding soil. When should I treat with Mycorrhizae? Ideally, you would want to treat as quickly as possible. As soon as roots are present, that's when you'll start the countdown. But you can have Mycorrhizae present even before roots are. You just would not start that countdown, of course, until the roots become present, because it is those roots emitting those hormones that create the germination and the colonization. But furthermore, applying when the plant is young allows for more bang for your buck, and it is more effective that way. Can I use fungicides if I grow with mycorrhizae? Absolutely yes. We have a detailed list of fungicide compatibility on our website. I can email it to you as well upon request. We have tested most commercially available fungicides. If there's one that we haven't, let us know and we will. And so we have them broken down into several categories. One is a avoid use, which not many fall under that category. One is just a minimal research column. And then one is that it's perfectly acceptable. We also have the product actinovate. It's a beneficial bacteria. And we use these products in tandem with one another quite often, and we do not have an issue whatsoever. And then even in the case of fungicides that fall into that avoid use category, we just suggest to not use the fungicide 2 weeks prior to inoculation or 4 weeks after. And then once you do, you can think of it as somewhat of a haircut to that mycelial network, which will still grow back, but it would be better to have allowed that mycelial network to grow to a more vigorous, healthy community first. Can I use insecticides, miticides, herbicides, and Pgrs if I grow with mycorrhizae? Yes, these products have not shown any impact on mycorrhizae, and then we've actually seen that with several non-mycorrhizal plants being considered common weeds, you can use the mycorrhizae in production in the landscape to allow for the crop that you're intending to better compete and outcompete those weeds. Can mycorrhizae be used with other biological products? Yes, as I mentioned before, it's used well in tandem with actinovate and things like trichoderma, which is root shield. And can mycorrhizae be used with beneficial insects and mites? Yes, absolutely. Mycorrhizae do not interfere with these natural pest predators. The mycorrhizae are living in the soil, and they will actually help to reduce plant stress. This is one of the secondary benefits, which can in turn lessen the pressure of pests and root pathogens on your plants. So this is not an EPA registered pesticide. Are there any horticultural crops that will not benefit from mycorrhizal inoculants? So as mentioned on that sheet earlier, there are a small percentage of plants that just do not form an association with mycorrhizae, or they have their own specific type of mycorrhizae. For example, brassicas are non-mycorrhizal, mustards are non-mycorrhizal, some ericaceous plants as well as orchids actually have their very own mycorrhizae. But in all of these cases, it does not hurt to apply mycorrhizae, and even in some, mycorrhizae can still provide a benefit. But if you're not looking to complicate production by weeding out which ones are and aren't mycorrhizal, you can apply to them all. And there is no such thing as over applying or harming a plant that isn't mycorrhizal by applying mycorrhizae to it. Can mycorrhizae reduce plant diseases? Overall, mycorrhizae does improve plant health very considerably, and it enhances the root absorptive area. It allows the plant to become less susceptible to pest pressure by producing an overall healthier plant. But it is not EPA registered and should not be considered as a pesticide. And it would always be used in the preventative sense rather than the corrective. Does mycorrhizae work with hemp and hops? both hemp and hops are endomycorrhizal. They are applied in the same horticultural application process as all of the other crops that we've mentioned and all endomycorrhizal plants. We mentioned that it's not an EPA approved product, so that's not needed. The mycorrhizae is considered a soil inoculant and leaves no traceable compounds on the flower. Then I just wanted to briefly discuss the other products that we offer at Mycorrhizal Applications. We have the Pyganic line, we have Azera, and the Evergreen Pro and Pyrethrin Concentrate. We also have our Actinovate products, and then we have several plant growth regulators. Those can be found on our website. And if you have interest in learning any more about these products, please send me an email. And here's my contact information. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me. I can help get you in touch with the distributor and get you answered any questions that you might have. I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.